Okay, good morning. How are you? I realize it's been a while since I've updated you on my thinking, my overview of what's going on at the moment. And the summary is this. I think this government have now put far, far too much on their own plate, a lot of it unnecessarily, a lot of it because they are a team of people who like picking fights. And they came into government wanting to just pick fights everywhere. So while they were the Vote Leave campaign, they were picking fights left, right, and centre with every part of the establishment, what they call the establishment that disagreed with them, come into government, and it's the same combative, aggressive attitude with everyone around them, from the micromanagement from within inside the team itself to the whole world outside them. And now they've just got such a list of problems on their plate that they cannot fight them all effectively. So let's have a little look through the list. Okay, there's Brexit. Nationally, the majority of people now, by quite a margin, think that it is the wrong decision. And this is before we even do it. It also causes tension between nations. Look at Scotland. So the mismanagement of how Boris Johnson has communicated and worked with Scotland since coming to power has seen a complete turnaround in the pollings about independence. Now, peaking just very recently at 58% for independence, and that's a lot of that is Brexit, but there's a lot more on top of that with Johnson's attitude towards Brexit, toward trade deals, toward just steamrolling everything that Scotland wants and giving it the English solution about Brexit and about trade and about standards and about whatever they like. Then Brexit still, there's the frictions and tensions that it has caused across Europe. Again, by Johnson's attitude with, for example, breaking international law, signing that treaty in bad faith, and then also demanding now that, Brexit is top of Europe's agenda after actually really poisoning the waters with all of those behaviors. And then further afield, that has now caused bad blood with Joe Biden, who is very, very, very likely to become the president elect in less than 20 days now. So that started with the international law breaking, then pushback from some of the senior Democrats and Nancy Pelosi, but then idiots from within the Conservative Party kicking off against them and against Joe Biden when he spoke out. And then that was even backed up by Republicans. So now they've really poisoned the water there. And that goes for a US trade deal, that goes for security relations, that goes for the lot. That is all just Brexit before it has happened. Now let's move on to coronavirus, where that is a difficult thing to manage in the best of circumstances. You can see plenty of other countries struggling with balancing, sort of trying to keep an economy as open as you can, whilst also putting in measures to crush down coronavirus to a level where it's not as absolutely devastating as it can be. But to go against the whole ethos of the NHS and localism by shoveling vast corrupt amounts of money into your chums in the private sector, to kick off against Northern mayors and sort of completely disregard them as well, to have the complete set of problems that you have with the scientific community because you haven't kept them on board. And then the behaviors that were had around supporting Dido Harding and supporting Dominic Cummings, when clearly they've made a mess of things, has just caused a ton of tensions that didn't need to be there. We've got a broken, centralized, corrupt private system instead of doubling down on well-functioning local publicly held systems that were well placed to do testing and to do tracing and to do all of those, and communication and all of those component parts that are needed. So now the government's got a ton of different battles on with regard to handling coronavirus, and the whole ethos of sort of like leveling up or investing in the NHS, they've blown themselves. Then we move on to trade and the issues that kicks off. not just around NHS, but more importantly, farmers now. So the farming community are completely up in arms, especially from the last vote about how this government has refused to guarantee in the trade bill or in the agriculture bill a level of standards for import, just a level of standards for import that is comparable to our own, so our farmers know that they are not going to be undercut. But it's not just the farmers. There's also everyone from Jamie Oliver to Prue Leith within the food industry, um, and chef community. All of those celebs are coming out as well, and they're coming out because they know that the public, by depending on the polls you use, 80% to 94% of the public do not want to compromise our food standards and do not want to compromise the animal welfare standards associated with food that we consume in this country, whether it be produced here or whether it be produced elsewhere. And yet the government is running roughshod over all of that as well. So it's picking a fight with the farmers as well, and it's picking a fight with the celebrity chefs and so forth and so on. So here we are in October now. On 12th of December, it's going to be 1 year since Boris Johnson came to power with an 80-seat majority, looking like he had a good 10 or maybe 15 years ahead of him. And it's all been blown, and the reason is down to they were arrogant, and so they were quite happy to pick fights with everyone, thinking they were in such a position of strength that they didn't need anyone else. So there was no investment or trust built with the other nations of the UK, or with local mayors and local structures, or with the civil service, and so, or even with the full set of Conservative MPs. It was just Dominic Cummings and his team micromanaging everything and picking fights all over the place. And now they can't put out all the fires they've started with the different communities of England and the United Kingdom and Europe and internationally. They've put far too much trouble on their own plate, and they are Billy No Mates within the management of this country, but also Billy No Mates internationally with our friends in Europe, or looks like now with America, should Joe Biden come in. So that's where we are, and that's I have to say, fundamentally emergent from that Brexiteer attitude of we don't. So no, not all Leave voters, but that certain attitude driven by the ERG and Cummings that we are exceptional, we know best, that driving arrogance of picking fights everywhere, not being a team player, not looking to build community beyond yourself. That's the core thing that has got them in trouble, but not just them, because obviously the whole nation is going to suffer now as we go into a winter of discontent with confusion about how to handle coronavirus, because this government spent the summer not having a clear strategy on getting the virus down and making sure the technology was in place for the return to universities and return to schools, but rather picking more fantasies and more fights. We're going to do Operation Moonshot. We're going to blame Public Health England and break it up. All of this daft behavior, right? So we are where we are now, and I just see it getting more grim for Boris Johnson during this winter. And it's going to get grimmer still as, of course, we go through Brexit, which they have completely mishandled, and no deal is a realistic option again. And I'm just hoping that, polls are showing and focus groups are showing that this is actually beginning to dawn on everyone. There's a mood that's growing in the country of recognizing that this really isn't the land of milk and honey. These are not sunlit uplands we're going into. We're going into a fairly grim place, and then from there we need to rebuild. And my suggestion for how we rebuild is just a lot more, boot the Tories out if we could, but rebuilding nationally and rebuilding internationally is going to be very important. We've got to stop doing our own crazy thing and actually look at how we rebuild regionally with the country, rebuild between our nations, giving the nations more powers is what you need to do. Rebuild with Europe and then rebuild our place in the world as a team player that is prepared to share rules. Okay, that's my thinking for today. Have a lovely Friday, and I'll catch you again soon.